Welcome back to another episode of How to Watch a Movie as a Christian. I'm Riley.
That's you. You're second.
I'm Javan.
So let's try it again.
I thought I was waiting.
Oh, that was
You're
good.
normally second.
Guys,
right?
how about we do...
I'm Ben.
No. How about, listen,
Oh,
since Javan's guest appearing, what if that whole interaction we just had was the intro? How to watch John Wick 4 or Chapter 4 as a Christian. John Wick Chapter 4 is the fourth John Wick movie in the John Wick series of movies. It comes after John Wick's 1, 2, and 3.
wow.
Now, John Wick is well known for a couple reasons. First, it sort of redefined the action movie.
It did.
What's the name of the action style?
John Wick style.
No.
I don't know.
Gun Fu.
Oh, Gun Fu. Yes.
Gun Fu. So
Where it's like fist fighting,
but
with pistols.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like Equilibrium then?
Well, so Equilibrium, Man on Fire, Taken, these movies were in the cultural zeitgeist as John Wick 1 came out. Mm-hmm. But John Wick took those and went further. John Wick is famous because it's directed by stunt performers, right?
Yep.
So the way they shot it is the way stunt performers wish movies were shot. Locked off, wide shots, medium shots. You can see the action. You know exactly and it highlights the stunts. So John Wick, what do we think about it? We have a couple thoughts. Maybe we'll kind of take turns asking some questions. Javan, you want to start us out? How does a Christian approach John Wick?
Within the themes of John Wick, some things that really stood out to me is there's a whole, it's this big revenge story of John Wick from the very first movie, trying to find freedom from his past sins. And he has this massive obligation to the assassin government. I don't even know what it is.
What are they called?
It's so cool though.
I don't know.
The table.
The table.
Sounds right.
And then there are all these consortiums, or what are they called? The hotels. What are they called?
The hotels.
The hotels are
places,
called
the sanctuaries.
The syndicate.
Just give me a few minutes.
The token.
I'll blurt it out when I remember.
Cool. There's this huge theme of atonement and the price and cost of freedom from past sins or past obligations. That I think The Continental. There you go. Thank you. I think that's really that. There's a gospel parallel there for sure.
So something about revenge and justice, you're saying?
Yes. There's a role of justice. There's a role of wrath, and there's also a role of price for freedom, all being played out in all of the movies. The first John Wick is right,
because
they killed my dog, I miss my wife, revenge.
I said I was out.
Yeah.
And they didn't respect that.
Yeah, but then he gets kind of sucked in again, and the rest of the movies is him trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually get out again?
It kind of falls into that category of vigilante, revenge thriller, action movie, quest for justice kind of a thing.
I think, one of the reasons why I resonate specifically with John Wick 4 so much is because it's an action movie that, in my opinion, is borrowing from every other action movie in the book. You have the physical comedy, you have the Jackie Chan style action in there, with I think of the nunchuck scene in John Wick 4 or the car fighting scene. Either using the environment in a way that Jackie Chan would, but they're also borrowing the action hero from the 80s that's larger than life, an Arnold Schwarzenegger type of character.
Super cool, stoic, walks away slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
But John Wick is also known for getting beat up.
Yeah, and it's able to have that too, where John Wick is this larger than life character, but he's also vulnerable and that to me is that's what got me amped up about John Wick 4 so much, was I could very clearly see it being, not to be so cliched, but it's a love letter to all the other action movies that are out there. And it's borrowing from this huge history of of action movies and choreography.
Yeah, it kind of takes the best of all these things.
Yeah.
It took every filmed stare in every action movie and put him in this one, and he fell down.
Okay,
Every stare.
And then they found the cathedral known for its staircase leading up to it. And then the final fight scene, well, before the duel, the fight scene on the stairs just went. It was like, wow, this is a great scene on stairs. And then I was like, oh, it's halfway over.
He
was
gets
so
almost to the
good.
top and then he falls down. Is he really gonna make it back up? Oh, he's trying. Oh, he's almost there.
Okay,
Oh, he
even
fell
that,
back
you
down.
guys, that's borrowing from Old Boy. The action scene when it's left to right and his progress of like beating the enemy is the more screen right he
I
gets.
think you're thinking of Super Mario Brothers.
No.
I
Same
know
concept.
that one.
Think Super Mario Brothers, but up.
Whoa.
So John Wick was written by some kind of action movie writer. It was originally called Scorn, and what you
That's cool.
know as the writer got Keanu Reeves on board. Keanu Reeves is the one who made it happen, and he's the one who he got his stunt performers that he had worked on previous movies to direct it, because he knew that they would make this cool. And then the editor, some girl, I don't remember her name, she's the one who took all the dialogue out in editing.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so it had all this style. It was kind of your run-of-the-mill thing.
This is John Wick 1.
John Wick 1. And Keanu Reeves is the one who renamed it John Wick. And then, because he knew it was really about that, the thing with the dog was not a part of the original screenplay, but it was a seed of an idea. And the producers thought, this is the idea. The dog has to die, and this is how it has to go. And that's what's going to hook the audience. Then the editor took it. This editor, she removed all the dialogue and made each scene like 2 words.
Fascinating.
And it just made it like iconic.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Because Keanu's just all,
he's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The line delivery is like, by number 4, it's become a bit of a parody.
you're like, does
It
he
gets
really
less and less
Does
dialogue.
he speak English? It seems hard for him.
He's talking like, all I want is to
Yeah.
be free.
Be free.
And then
Yeah, he
speaks
becomes
Russian
more of an
just
archetype.
Perfectly.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, but there is something archetypal. It's like pure, right? It's pure. It harkens back to like old heroes, stoic, masculine, just revenge, justice. Like there's really nothing impure about it. John Wick is known for its action and its violence. We haven't really talked about violence, right, in movies yet, have we?
We've talked a little bit about it in terms of,
We talked about fear.
we talked about, I think it was in our video about Batman, Dark Knight. We talked about what's celebrated.
Yeah.
And I think this is another conversation that we could have now. Is like, if that's where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Violence, where does that play in? And is it celebrated in the movie or is it not? Because I think for me, this movie's like very clearly in like the binging, fun, crazy. It's not like impacting my life. It's not speaking into my life at all. It's just pure entertainment. Because I don't think it actually glorifies violence. It's an incredibly silly movie.
It is.
The
In a
violence of it.
fictional
What's
world.
the line there? And if someone were to say, you know, I think it's becoming more and more of a question among Christians how much violence we should intake. It was, I think, a given not too long ago that violent movies are fine. You know, seemed to me it just wasn't a big problem, especially in America. You talk to Christians in France, and you see this reflected in their movies. Way less violence in movies, way more sex in movies in France. And the Christians in France go, "What is it with you Americans and your obsession with violence? We are way and your prudish obsession against sex." So their movies are way more sexualized, way less violent. Ours are way more violent, and then the sexual stuff is kind of rated way higher, right?
Yeah.
So Yeah, but I do think that the conversation about what is permissible or wise in watching violent content, what are your personal thoughts on it? What's the line? How do you know this is a silly, kind of silly, not cartoonish, not real life type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's so quantifiable. It's comical, and it's ridiculousness. I mean, John Wick, yeah, he gets beat up, and as you watch him, you're kind of like, you have this thought like, he's getting pretty beat up. Is he good at this? And then you're like, oh, that's right, he killed thousands of people. Find myself laughing in a weird, sick way. I don't know if I'm just damning myself by saying this, but it's like it's silly. There's something clearly silly about it, because the reason why he's killing is not silly at all. His wife dies and gives him a dog post her death. I mean, she's on her deathbed, and then he gets a package with his dog, and it's like, this is from me. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's like so incredibly meaningful. And then those boys steal his car and kill his dog. And so now it's a revenge story about his dog and his car. And they're like, you stole John Wick's car, you idiot,
Mm-hmm.
And so
Which, playing to Javan's point, a man's dog, a man's car is extremely masculine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so he goes on this killing rampage, and revenge is a very serious thing, but then it very quickly turns into like, oh, he's just killing a bunch of people. He just is so bloodthirsty. This is crazy. And so immediately I think that's when my mind goes, the danger part of my mind goes, oh, this is silly. This isn't really a teaching lesson here. But I don't know if that's good.
For me, what triggered that was the hotels.
Continental.
The Continental. Those, but there's an element of like world building in it. Goofy world building of like, I've got this gold token. Now, what is that even like? What's the value there?
And literally every person on the street
Right.
of these cities is some assassin. I'm like, what's the economy here?
It's
How
so
many
fun.
people are being
They're all
assassinated?
assassins, and they all have the same phone.
Yes,
That's what I think is
they all have
crazy.
the same flip
So
phone.
is it at the end of 3?
And
They're
the,
like,
and the girls, the like old fashioned switchboard girls, in
Yeah.
the Eiffel
At
the top of
Tower.
the Eiffel
That's right.
Tower.
What's up,
that is,
boys?
that is silly.
This is
John
so
Wick.
fun.
It is. You're right. Clearly, this is ridiculous. It really
little
is
silly.
like a middle school plot,
It is.
but it does tap into something. You do just go, that's kind of cool. Like,
I did watch all of them
well,
on end,
this is
and
what I'm
I had a
saying
good
is
time.
for you. Just knowing your position on violence and on followers of Jesus and our position on these things.
Yeah, what's my position?
Your position is you're not down with violence,
It's true.
and that's good. But here we are watching John Wick.
No,
Yeah.
true.
I'm sure
So-
people are asking, is it that I'm anti-violence and I can watch this content, or am I weirdly getting my violence through these movies?
I think that is a worthy conversation. I wonder, like, in a culture that doesn't have gladiators killing each other, do those people in that culture make movies like John Wick?
Because they live them.
Because they just have to have some outlet.
So we're like these sinful humans that like, I'm really against violence, but I still need to see it. I still really need to
That's what I'm
watch
saying.
it for
And I think
several hours.
This goes back to like our conversation about watching scary movies. I think it's a little more primal than that. I think violence in movies is human. The one of the things about stories is that they take us to the extent of human experience. And so you go, why are people dying in our movies? Because we want to know what humans would go through. I don't want to die, so therefore I'm going to tell stories about what that's like and
Sure.
what it's like to be on the run and have your life in danger, because it helps me to know the boundaries of my experience and how far I can go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
There's an element too of like you're anti-violence because you are a disciple of Jesus. So you do not consume content that has violence. But
I will speak to that. Continue.
The scriptures have a lot of violence in
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I can't. There's no way I'm anti-violence because I'm pro-atonement.
Right.
And so, like, Jesus dying on the cross, that's that's violence.
Yeah, it's very violent.
And I believe that one day King Jesus will come back and make all things right. That's going to include violence.
It will be violent.
So
yeah.
I'm in saying, because one time you actually corrected me. You're like, you're not anti-violence. You're anti you being violent. Because you
Right.
believe that you have a God that will redeem things and
Yeah.
will punish the wicked. So it's true. There is this like, I'm watching the wicked be punished in ways.
And there's something about the difference, like even in the story of John Wick, there is a notable difference between what the Russian guys did at the beginning of the first movie and what John Wick is currently doing, even though the kill count is like way off balance here.
Dog, car, stolen.
But we
John
as
Wick kills
the point
400
is like
people.
we as humans recognize a difference somehow.
Yeah.
Right? We go, this taking of life is different somehow than this one. And that's interesting to explore.
Yes.
And not only that, but it is a story. It is a farce. It's fake. And to Javan's point, John Wick represents something, like a quest of justice. And in your own life, you have a little bit of this. Something was taken from me, and I'm on the run trying to atone for it, get free from it. I'm trying to escape it. I'm trying to put it right. So it kind of, it in an extreme sense, taps into that. Well, let's just ask this. Is there anything unique that a Christian kind of brings to John Wick, or are we just like one of the bros? Are Christians just like all the other dudes watching John Wick?
I do think as a boy, I'm legally required to like John Wick.
It's part of manhood.
It's like in my genes, there's a code that's like John Wick, you will like. I do think that question we brought up of violence and the role of violence within our discipleship and consuming it, that's a really interesting question. And it's one that I don't have a full answer for, other than the type of content that I watch. I know a distinct difference between violence and like sexual content for me. With violence, I always know like, yeah, that was a blood splurt. Like that's all fake. But with sexual content, you can't fake that.
You can't fake it.
You can't fake nudity.
That guy didn't really die, but that person really is naked.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a distinct difference. And as a Christian, my perspective on John Wick is, yeah, I love it. Praise God.
I do think it taps into like this primal revenge thing, this vengeance thing. I think that if you were to like apply the teachings of Scripture, if you were to like present the gospel to John,
Keep going.
you'd probably say, love your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
True.
But he's an assassin. Of course he's not going to love his enemies. And so I think that it taps into vengeance. It's actually a lot like all other revenge thrillers in the sense that a follower of Jesus simply would not do these things.
Right.
Because the way of Jesus simply says not to. It's extremely clear.
Unless you're Vin Diesel in the
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious movies.
I haven't seen any of those.
See the first one?
Yeah, they
I'm
do
good
a
with
bunch of heists and some killing, and then they pray for their meal.
Classic Catholics. I don't even know if they're Catholic. I know John Wick's Eastern Orthodox.
I think closing thoughts. Yeah, it's the how a Christian would walk into that movie. I think wisdom would say, be careful, limit yourself, right? I think walking down, like watching all the 4 John Wick movies in 72 hours was something that I could do probably one time. I was exhausted, truly. There's so much death. It was crazy. But then there's also just this, like, read the book of Judges and tell me that that's not equal amounts of death and violence. It's like, this is not to, like, sorry, John, if you're watching, but, it's like, this is life without any hope in it. It's death equals death equals death equals death. There's no fixing things. There's just more death. And I'm not worried about that because I know it doesn't affect me that way. I can just write it off.
You can kind of file it under the, like, when it comes to like consuming content, there's some content that's like it's like cocaine. Like a hit equals intoxication, poison to the body. But then there's some content that's like alcohol. It's about a gradient. Like moderation, watch your limit, right? Toxicity meter. You have a toxicity meter. And I think that's actually the case with most, if not all, content. It's true of the news. So I think in terms of like my personal relationship to content, yeah, I think you have to just kind of go, I'm responsible before God for how I live in the way of Jesus. And I can recognize that these stories are tapping into what Javan's saying, these like primal desires as a man or just as a human. Justice, revenge, running, being on the hunt, being hunted, while also recognizing that if I were in the same boat, would I do the same thing? But to your point, that's not why you watch John Wick. You're not even close to thinking this is real.
John Wick's not my role model. Jesus is a role model. John Wick is a guy I watch because he kills a lot of people, and it's that's what he does.
And I think to what you were saying earlier is like, what's being glorified? It's hard to know a lot of movies that actually glorify something improper, such as violence.
Well, this is glorifying. It's saying that evil things need to be paid for. And to that I say, correct.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's good.
Thank you, John Wick.
I love that. Thank you, John Wick, for teaching us that evil things need to be paid for with many lives.
Wrong way to go about it.
Cool. Well, this has been How to Watch a Movie as a Christian. We'll see you at church.